Hello, everyone. Welcome to Highway of the Hidden. I'm your host, Polar Bear. So, on tonight's episode, we are going to go over the attack of Ape Canyon 1924. So, this attack happened to Mr. Fred Beck and four of his friends. They were mining out in Mount St. Helens, Washington, and they were attacked by some Sasquatches. It's a very interesting encounter, so let's get into it. And this is what he had to say about it. First of all, I wish to give an account of the attack and tell the famous incident of July 1924 when the hairy apes attacked our cabin. We had been prospecting for 6 years in the Mount St. Helens and Lewis River in the area of southwest Washington. We had, from time to time, come across large tracts by creek beds and springs. In 1924, I and four other miners were working our gold claim, the Vander White. It was 2 miles east of Mount St. Helens near a deep canyon, now named Ape Canyon, which was so named after an account of the incidents reached the newspapers. Hank, a great hunter and good woodsman, was always a little apprehensive after seeing the tracks. The tracks were large, and we knew that no known animal could have made them. The largest measured 19 inches long. It was in the middle of July, and we had received a good assay of our claim, and everyone was excited. I remember I had a toothache, and I suggested that Hank should take me to town to see a dentist, but he was so enthused in the prospects of the gold mine, he barely took time to answer me. He replied that God or the devil could not get him away from there. We had all come up in his Ford. I had no way to get to town unless he took me. So when we went back to our cabin on the north side of the canyon, I had a nagging toothache and little appetite for our evening meal of beans and hot cakes. Hank, though apprehensive, was still determined. We had been hearing noises in the evening for about a week. We heard a shrill, peculiar whistling each evening. We would hear it coming from one ridge and then hear an answering whistling from another ridge. We also heard a sound which I could best describe as a booming, thumping sound, just like something was hitting itself on his chest. Hank asked me to accompany him to the spring, about 100 yards from our cabin, to get some water, and suggested we take our rifles, to be on the safe side. We walked to the spring, and then Hank yelled and raised his rifle, and in that instant, I saw it. It was a hairy creature. It was about 100 yards away and on the other side of a little canyon, standing by a pine tree. It dodged behind the tree and poked its head out from the side of the tree, and at the same time, Hank shot. I could see bark fly out from the tree, and each of his 3 shots. Someone may say that was quite a distance to see bark fly out, but I saw it. The creature I judged to have been about 7 feet tall, with blackish brown hair. It disappeared from our view for a short time, but then we saw it running fast and upright about 200 yards down the little canyon. I shot 3 times before it disappeared from view. We took the water back to the cabin and explained the affair to the rest of the party, and we all agreed, including Hank, to go home the next morning, as it would be dark before we could get to the car, and we agreed it would be unsound to be caught by the darkness on the way out. Nightfall found us in our pine log cabin we had built, and we had made it very sturdy. It stood for years after the encounter, and was visited by many sightseers and Bigfoot enthusiasts, until a few years ago, when it was burned to the ground, and the circumstances of the fire I do not recall. In the cabin, we had long bunk beds, in which 2 could sleep feet to feet, the rest of us sleeping on pine boughs on the floor. At one end of the cabin, we had a fireplace fashioned out of rocks. There were no windows in the cabin, so the darkness found us all in the cabin. More calm now. My tooth was better. Somehow the excitement seemed to work a temporary cure on it. We were sitting around puffing pipes and talking about the trip home the next day. Each of us settled down on his crude but welcome bed and soon fell asleep. About midnight, we were all awakened. Hank, who was sleeping on the floor, was yelling and kicking, but the noise that had awakened us was a tremendous thud against the cabin wall. Some of the chinking had been knocked loose between the logs, and it fell across his chest. He had his rifle in hand and was waving it back and forth as he kicked and yelled. Hank always slept with his gun nearby. It was a Remington automatic, my gun being a 30-30 Winchester, which I still have. I helped to get the chinking off of him. He jumped to his feet, and then we heard a great commotion outside. It sounded like a great number of feet trampling and rattling over a pile of our unused shakes. We grabbed our guns. Hank squinted through the space left by the chinking. By actual count, we saw only 3 of the creatures together at one time, but it sounded like there were many more. This was the start of the famous attack, of which so much was written in Washington and Oregon papers throughout the years. Most accounts tell of giant boulders being hurled against the cabin. Some even fell through the roof. but this was not the case. There were very few large rocks around in that area. It is true that many smaller ones were hurled at the cabin. They did not break through the roof, but hit with a bang and rolled off. Some did fall through the chimney of the fireplace. Some accounts state I was hit in the head by a rock and knocked unconscious. This is not true. The only time we shot our guns that night was when the creatures were attacking our cabin. When they would quiet down for a few minutes, we would quit shooting. I told the rest of the party that maybe if they saw we were only shooting when they attacked, they might realize we were only defending ourselves. We would have clear shots at them through the opening left by the chinking we had chosen to shoot. We did shoot, however, when they climbed up on our roof. We shot round after round through the roof. We had to brace the huge log door with a long pole taken from the bunk bed. The creatures were pushing against it, and the whole door vibrated from the impact. We responded by firing many more rounds through the door. They pushed against the walls of the cabin as if trying to push the cabin over, but this was pretty much an impossibility. As previously stated, the cabin was a sturdy made building. Hank and I did most of the shooting. The rest of the party crowded to the far end of the cabin, guns in their hand. One had a pistol, which is still in my family's possessions. The other clutched their rifles. They seemed stunned and incredulous. The attack continued the remainder of the night, with only short intervals in between. A most profound and frightening experience occurred when one of the creatures, being close to the cabin, reached an arm through the chinking space and seized one of our axes by the handle. A much written about incident, a true one. Before the thing could pull the axe out, I swiftly turned the head of the axe upright so that it caught on the logs. At the same time, Hank's shot barely missing my hand. The creature let go, and I pulled the handle back in and put the axe in a safe place. A humorous thing I remember well was Hank singing, "If you leave us alone, we'll leave you alone, and we'll all go home in the morning." He did not mean it to be humorous, for Hank was dead serious, and sang it under the impression that the mountain devils, as he called them, might understand and go away. The attack ended just before daylight, just as soon as we were sure it was light enough to see, and we came cautiously out of the cabin. It was not long before I saw one of the ape-like creatures standing about 80 yards away near the edge of the Ape Canyon. I shot 3 times as it toppled over a cliff down into the gorge some 400 feet below. Then Hank said we should get out of there as soon as possible, not bother to pack our supplies or equipment out. After all, he said, it's better to lose them than our lives. We were all only too glad to agree. We brought out only that which we could get into our pack sacks. We left about $200 in supplies, powder, and drilling equipment behind. I tried to persuade everyone not to relate the happenings to anyone, and they agreed. But Hank soon let the cat out of the bag. We made our way to Spirit Lake, and Hank went into the ranger station. He had told the ranger earlier about the tracks, and the ranger had replied, "Let me know if you find any, or find out what they are." And that's just what Hank did, to the puzzlement of the ranger. When we were back home in Kelso, Washington, he told some of his friends, and somehow the story leaked out to the papers, and the Great Hairy Ape Hunt of 1924 was on. Local reporters interviewed us. They came from Portland, Seattle, and even a big game hunter from England came asking questions. He had a large gun with him. It must have been an elephant gun. Many people flocked to Mount St. Helens area looking for the great hairy apes or mountain devils. I myself went back with 2 reporters and a detective from Portland, Oregon. We found large tracks. They photographed them. We did not see any ape men then, nor could we find the ones we had shot. So people were asking questions. Was it true? Or was it just a wild tale? I can assure you it is true. Are they human, animal, or devils? That was the Great Ape Hunt of 1924. A wealthy person offers a large sum of money for anyone that can capture one alive. Sightings have been reported in Canada, Washington, Oregon, and Northern California. So that is the Ape Canyon Attack of 1924. Fred Beck, I assume, is no longer with us, but I don't think he was lying about that attack. I think that really happened. Can you imagine, though, being in the woods in 1924 of all times and finding tracks 19 inches long? Think about that. Right? Who in their right mind is going to be out in the woods hoaxing tracks in 1924? Even today, some people do hoax things, right? They would hoax some tracks, maybe go out, maybe let's say 10, 15 miles from like in a national forest and plant some fake tracks or something. But that far out, I don't see it, man. And that's when people say, "Oh man, how can you still believe in Bigfoot?" Yeah, because nobody's going to go out 50, 60, 70 miles from the nearest civilization in hopes that someone's out there researching Bigfoot and find fake tracks and then come out later, yeah, those were mine. Yeah, prove that those were yours. You know what I mean? Especially in that time period, because people didn't know what Bigfoot was. I mean, they had Native American legends, but they got another thing on here that talks about. Here's one. I'll read it. The forestry employees have investigated many reports of strange creatures. According to native legend, the ferocious Salatuck Indians, a band of renegades, much like giant apes in appearance, who lived like wild animals in the secluded caves of the Cascades. The first recorded encounter of the apes with white men was in 1924. A group of 5 prospectors rushed into Kelso to report that a group of great ape-like creatures had attacked them in the middle of the night. The miners said they had been working a mine on the east slopes of Mount St. Helens during the daytime, and they saw some of the apes and fired at them to halt an apparent attack. One of the apes appeared to have been hit and rolled into a deep ravine. That night, according to the account, the ape men hurled rocks into the cabin and danced and screamed until daylight. Then the great ape hunt of 1924. Law enforcement officers and a flock of newspapermen made up a posse that went into the area. Searchers fired at anything that moved. So the report went. They returned to tell the finding of huge footprints but no apes. The legend grew from that point for several years and subsided with only sporadic reports of traces of the apes. Responsible persons, experienced mountaineers, and skiers have given credence to the story. Bob Lee of Portland, a leader of the 1961 Himalayan expedition and advisor to the last year Himalayan expedition, said he had a strange experience. Lee has never claimed to have seen apes, but said there was something strange on the high slopes of the mountain. He was a member of the party that searched for Jim Carter, an experienced skier and mountaineer who vanished on the mountain of 1950. His disappearance remains a mystery. So that's what I'm saying. These Bigfoot, Sasquatch, Yeti, whatever you call them, these encounters happen, and I don't think they're not humans. People go missing all the time, right? And I think it just depends on the Bigfoot's mood that day. You're either going to live or you're not. I don't think people are out there hoaxing it. Now, do I believe sometimes people just go missing? Yeah, because they don't know what they're doing or they're inexperienced and then they fall down the ravine or whatever and they're never seen from again. But when an experienced hiker or mountaineer goes missing, no, I think they ran into the creature. Tons of these stories and legends that come out of people getting kidnapped by and surviving and coming back and saying, yeah, Great Hairy Man found me and blah, 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 blah. And, you know, they let me live. And that's why I don't think a lot of these are hoaxes. I think a lot of these really happen way out in the middle of the national forest. No, I honestly believe those are real Bigfoot encounters. Yeah. That's going to be it for today. This is a shorter episode. Got this shirt made, trying it out. If you like it, let me know. Leave a comment. If you want to be on the show, shoot me an email. The email address is polarbearhoth@gmail.com. You can DM me on TikTok or Instagram, or you can go to the Facebook page, Highway of the Hidden, and shoot a message on there and we'll return to you. Thanks.